For decades, he was basically a phantom, a faceless predator who haunted an entire state, leaving this trail of terror that stretched all the way from Sacramento down to Orange County. He went by a lot of names, but for a whole generation, he was just California's boogeyman. And then, after 40 years of silence, the ghost was caught. So, how do you catch a ghost? I mean, that's the question, right? It's a question that stumped detectives for decades, a mystery that really seemed like it was destined to stay unsolved forever. But the answer? It wasn't found in some dusty old file cabinet. Nope, it was hiding in plain sight, encoded in the DNA of complete strangers. Okay, let's dive into how they finally found him.
First, you really have to wrap your head around the sheer amount of time we're talking about here. The crimes kick off in 1974. Then they just stop in 1986. And after that, nothing. For 32 years, the case went absolutely ice cold. The trail vanished. This wasn't just a cold case. It was completely frozen in time, leaving victims and their families stuck in this awful suspended state of justice.
So what finally broke that 32-year silence? Well, the answer lies in this absolutely revolutionary technique that basically turned the entire world of genealogy into an unlikely dragnet for a killer. On April 24, 2018, the ghost finally got a face. And let me tell you, it was a shocker. It wasn't some shadowy figure lurking in the darkness. It was a 72-year-old grandfather, a U.S. Navy veteran, and a former police officer named Joseph James D'Angelo. He was just living this quiet life in a Sacramento suburb. Literally, the last person you might suspect of being a monstrous serial killer.
The key to all of this was a brand new tool, forensic genetic genealogy. And the way it works is just fascinating. Investigators take DNA from a crime scene, in this case, from a rape kit that was decades old, and they upload it to public genealogy websites. The same kind of sites people use to build their family trees. But here's the brilliant part. They aren't looking for a direct match with the killer. They're looking for his relatives. And this just lays out the step-by-step process so perfectly. Okay, so first, they uploaded the killer's DNA to a site called GED Match. They got a hit, not on the killer himself, but on his distant cousins. We're talking people who shared great-great-great-grandparents with him. From there, investigators and a genealogist built out this massive family tree, which eventually had about 1,000 people on it. 1,000! Then it was just this painstaking process of elimination. They ruled people out based on their age, their sex, where they lived, until only one single name was left: Joseph D'Angelo. So, we know how they caught him. But now let's talk about what exactly his arrest finally brought to light. Because this didn't just solve one set of crimes. Oh no, it connected the dots between multiple, terrifying crime sprees that everyone thought were completely separate.
Yeah, the DNA didn't just point to a killer. It revealed that 3 of California's most feared criminals were all the same person. And his evolution as a predator began back in Central California as the Visalia Ransacker. So, from 1974 to 75, the Ransacker was behind around 120 burglaries. But his motives were strange. He'd break in, trash the place, and steal these odd personal items, like a single earring or some coins, and he'd leave cash sitting right there in plain sight. This was never about money. It was about psychological terror. And it tragically escalated when he murdered Professor Claude Snelling during a failed attempt to kidnap Snelling's daughter. And then, after the Snelling murder, the ransackings in Visalia just stopped. D'Angelo, who, by the way, was a police officer in a nearby town at the time, moved up to the Sacramento area. And there, he evolved into something far, far more monstrous: the East Area Rapist. His methods were just chillingly methodical. He'd stalk his victims for weeks, learning their habits. He'd attack couples in their beds, tie up the man, and then, in this signature move of pure psychological torture, he'd stack dishes on his back and warn him that if he heard a single rattle, he'd kill everyone in the house. Then he'd rape the woman for hours. He was so brazen, he even made taunting phone calls to his victims and the police. And he killed again, murdering Brian and Katie Mezzarolio in 1978.
And the scale of his rampage as the East Area Rapist is just staggering. He is confirmed to have committed at least 51 rapes in Northern California. 51! Entire communities were just paralyzed with fear. So here's what investigators finally pieced together, and it's just staggering. The Visalia Ransacker, the East Area Rapist, and a third killer down in Southern California known as the original Night Stalker. They were all the same man. One predator, wearing different masks, evolving his tactics over a decade. He starts with burglaries, escalates to serial rape, and finally becomes a prolific serial killer, murdering 10 more people in Southern California.
And this brings us to what is maybe the most disturbing part of the whole story: the man himself. I mean, how could someone responsible for so much horror just hide in plain sight for so long?
The contrast is just jarring. On one side, you've got his public life: Navy vet, a cop, a husband, a father of 3, a truck mechanic, just the picture of a normal suburban guy. And then on the other side, the horrifying reality: a serial murderer, a serial rapist, a predator who terrorized an entire state for 12 years. And he committed most of these crimes while he was married and raising a family. But, when you look back, you can see the cracks in that facade. Neighbors said he had this volcanic temper, prone to these loud, profane outbursts. His own brother-in-law remembered him casually bringing up the East Area rapist in conversations while the attacks were actually happening. And get this, he was fired from the police force in 1979, right in the middle of his crime spree, not for any of his horrific crimes, but for shoplifting a hammer and a can of dog repellent. And yet, through all of that, his own family had no idea.
After his arrest, they left him alone in an interrogation room, and he started talking to himself, revealing this bizarre internal world. He spoke about this alternate personality, an inner Jerry, who he claimed forced him to do all these things. In his own words, he said, "I didn't have the strength to push him out. He made me. I pushed Jerry out and had a happy life. I did all those things." It's this strange, self-serving monologue that offers a chilling glimpse into a fractured and truly monstrous mind.
So what was the final outcome? Well, the capture of the Golden State Killer closed one of the most terrifying cold cases in American history. But at the same time, it opened up a whole new chapter filled with some really complex questions. So because of the statute of limitations, D'Angelo couldn't actually be charged for the rapes, so the prosecutors made a deal. To avoid the death penalty, he pleaded guilty to 13 murders and 13 kidnappings, and by doing that, he had to admit to all the rapes and burglaries as well, which finally gave his victims a public acknowledgement. He was sentenced to life without parole and gave this short, almost robotic apology in court.
And this really brings us to the legacy of the whole thing. Catching the Golden State Killer was a monumental achievement. It proved that no case is truly cold. But, and this is a big but, it was done using a method that turns public DNA databases, sites where millions of us have voluntarily uploaded our genetic info to find relatives, into a powerful tool for law enforcement. And that opened up a massive new debate.
And this case really leaves us with a crucial final question. A monster was brought to justice, and dozens of families finally got answers they'd waited decades for. But the tool that caught him has profound implications for all of us. Think about it. When you upload your DNA to find a long-lost cousin, you might also be implicating a relative in a crime without ever knowing it. So yeah, justice was absolutely served. But it forces us to ask, what is the price of that justice in our new genetic age?